Hey everyone, welcome to the Kentico Rocks podcast, the podcast about all things Kentico Xperience, Kentico content, .NET and Azure. This is your host, Brian McKeiver, and I'm really excited today to be joined by a colleague of mine, a fellow Kentico Xperience MVP, Mike Wills of BlueModus. Mike, how are you doing?
Hey everybody, it's nice to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us. I mean, we've been planning this for 3 months or so, but to actually get the time on our calendars that line up well between Seattle and Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've got the whole, time zone thing to deal with. So that's always fun.
Right. And customers.
Yeah. So I really appreciate it, Mike, because I know you have a ton of background in this CMS world that we play in as both an partner, developer. You've got lots of business sense, technical sense. I'm just excited to have you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Brian.
Go ahead, Mike. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, just in case they're not sure who you are? I think that makes sense. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, everybody. I've been in the Microsoft world for a long time. Obviously, since I'm in the Seattle area, did a little bit of product development, then moved into agency work and got focused early on developing websites and web applications for customers. Discovered Kentico probably 7 or 8 years ago and loved it so much I moved into my current company for the purpose of staying in the Kentico community. I'd say the first Kentico event I attended really cinched the deal for me, because I discovered it was a community of people that were willing to support each other and help each other out and learn best practices and so on, and felt like a good community to stay in.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're glad to have you too. I know you've helped out the community quite a bit, so thank you for that. And now you're also recognized as a Kentico Xperience MVP. So welcome to that small little club. We appreciate you being part of the team. I'm assuming that was something that you're pretty proud of being an MVP.
Absolutely, it was something I wanted to do ever since. Actually, that event I told you about, how could I stay in this community? Well, it'd help if I was an MVP. And then moving to BlueModus, where I'm at now, obviously is a big help to stay in the Kentico community, because we do a lot of Kentico work.
Right. Yeah. Well, and so because we both do a lot of Kentico work, we're here today to announce the fact that there's now this new thing called Kentico Cloud Plus, and it's a complete merger of all of the Kentico products ever in the sun. Just kidding. It's actually an April Fool's joke. We just couldn't resist. We had to do something because it is April Fool's Day, so welcome everyone to April. I would also like to point out the fact that we had snow on the ground here in Michigan this morning. It's been a kind of a crappy day overall, so I hope you enjoyed the little joke. But no, our actual topic today that we want to talk about is how do we actually leverage and use to its best of its abilities the Xperience platform in an established microservice enterprise architecture. And Mike, I think you've got some background on this, and maybe a little story you could tell or some experience that you can share to maybe attack some of the fears or misconceptions that when we've talked to our clients, I know you have talked to yours and I've talked to mine about some of this stuff before, there's all these concerns that come up. So again, maybe what does that mean to you when you hear leverage Xperience as a DXP in an established enterprise architecture that has a lot of other services that are available to it?
Right. Well, a lot of large enterprises already have their web properties. They may even have custom platforms. And they're so integrated and so robust that the idea of re-platforming it to a traditional CMS like Xperience, the whole idea could be dead on arrival. And that was the case for one of my customers. It's a Fortune 500 B2B supplier, and they had 2 major e-commerce properties doing $5 million a day. So do they want to rebuild that with all their robust custom e-commerce work? Do they want to re-platform that onto Xperience? There would have been a lot of resistance to that, and it would have been a huge project. But they still had a content management problem. At the time, their e-commerce sites only handled e-commerce. So they had product pages and order history and checkout. But the marketing team needed to manage pages, and they were doing it in a legacy CMS, and they had to use network routing to route some page requests to their legacy CMS and other page requests to the e-commerce, and they couldn't actually bring the content together. For example, you couldn't have videos and product galleries on the product pages because that was marketing content handled by a different platform.
And
Yeah. So that was the situation they were in. The whole idea of rebuilding to use a CMS, that was a no-go, not a chance.
right. I mean, when you talk about like larger organizations, chances are they have many teams that use certain tools that may be different than others. As you just mentioned, like the marketing team is very worried about the marketing content. Maybe product team has a different e-commerce tool. Maybe the digital team, the PR team, or whatever has a different marketing automation platform they want to use. So they're maybe not looking for a whole all-in-one solution, and that's what Kentico Xperience is definitely can play well in that space, but it also can fit very nicely alongside other services.
Yeah. And that's really what they wanted. The marketing team wanted a more robust experience for their customers on the main e-commerce sites, but the e-commerce sites were handled by the IT department. And what was the number one thing for them? Stability. Outages were extremely expensive. Take millions. Like if they do millions a day, imagine how expensive it would be to have an outage that lasted an hour.
Yeah.
So the marketing team would say, hey, let's re-platform on this so we can use these cool tools. And of course, the IT department would say, no way, you don't even know what you're asking. This is not possible. So, they started talking to us, and as we looked at their needs, it really seemed like a headless architecture would work for them. They already had a microservices architecture. And if we provided web APIs that fit into their architecture for getting content, then the e-commerce application could serve marketing content and the e-commerce content side by side and even blended together to provide the best experience for their customers. So that's what they went with. And it turned out it was kind of an aha moment. This is how other large enterprises can adopt Kentico Xperience or any other platform that normally would provide its own web presentation and therefore turn into an obstacle for adopting the platform. By using a headless architecture, enterprises could bring it alongside as another microservice in their enterprise architecture and use it in a way that fits into their existing applications rather than competes with it.
Yeah, it really makes the Experience platform like content management as a service. You can build your content types and page types and set up your tree and expose that content through APIs. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually Kentico Xperience is very flexible for that type of solution. So I have one quick question for you on what you just said. I'm curious. Was that solution obvious from the beginning? And did they bring it to you, or did after you went through their needs and kind of looked at what they had in the house already from a tool or microservice standpoint, was it something that like you kind of brought to them? So I'm just kind of curious which way you kind of thought of it first.
Yeah, so I can't take full credit for it. It's actually the team at BlueModus. I'm pretty sure Dave at BlueModus came up with the idea. But headless CMSs have been around. Content as a service solutions have been around. Not a lot of people understand them or know a lot about them, but the interest was growing. So we were aware of them. There was interest. We actually implemented solutions based on headless CMS platforms before. But for their needs, they wanted an on-premise solution. They wanted the other features of Kentico Xperience, like the online marketing features. And so, we brought to them this idea of using a headless architecture, and it sort of resolved all kinds of concerns they had. So it was a easy decision once the idea came up. Made the marketing team happy, and immediately the IT team is like, oh, so we're not going to be pressured into re-platforming these large e-commerce apps that we've invested so much in.
Right, because that's a massive gargantuan project that probably no one thought about during the initial scoping of that engagement. It makes sense. So I know it's probably pretty obvious to most listeners when we talk about headless from a content management standpoint, but one thing you just said is also super interesting to me in terms of the digital marketing aspect, marketing automation or email marketing or even the personalization that Xperience can do. Is there anything special there that you had to do to make the system behave where we're leveraging those tools for marketers, but the output of them is then delivered over that API style?
Sure. Yeah. So the content is conceptually more simple. You provide web APIs that the e-commerce app can use to pull content out of Kentico. And it could even drive the routing. It does drive the routing on the e-commerce site for their marketing pages. But to use the online marketing features, the main thing they needed to use is the contact management, activity tracking, so that they can actually profile site visitors, and then email marketing. And to do that, we were actually able to create web APIs, like a web API for recording an activity. So the e-commerce site would come up with a unique visitor ID and pass it in, and that was usable in Xperience as a contact ID to be able to track activities. And then they would need some endpoints, for example, for subscribing to a newsletter, unsubscribing, and so on. And we did a trick. We created endpoints in the e-commerce site that actually matched the Kentico Xperience endpoints for recording email views, viewing an email in browser, unsubscribing, and so on. So on the online marketing side, Kentico Xperience didn't even really have to know that it wasn't available to be hit by the public, because all the endpoints the email builder was using worked. They just happened to be served by the MVC app instead. Now, we could have done it cheaper by using routing rules at the network level just to route those requests to Xperience, but the enterprise had such a bad experience having to manage all that traffic routing they'd been doing between the legacy CMS and their e-commerce app that they were like, we're trying to get away from that. So we'd rather go ahead and kind of create a facade in the e-commerce site to provide the endpoints for Kentico Xperience.
Fantastic.
But it worked. It was pretty satisfying to go to a separate app that had no Kentico component in it, subscribe to a newsletter, get a confirmation email from Kentico, click, yes, I confirm.
Yeah.
I want to subscribe, and that comes back into Kentico Xperience. So the whole end-to-end integration was working even for the online marketing features in a headless model.
Cool. And I love how you're using web APIs for this. And I'm assuming you rolled your own web API project endpoints on top of the Xperience API. I get this all the time, and we see this all the time in the DevNet forums for Xperience about, well, should I use the built-in REST API interface? And pro tip for those out there, just don't. There's too much pain with that. It has too many issues. It's a little old. Even though, yes, it's a nice thing you can turn on and suddenly you have an API. I really would recommend doing what Mike has done with his team to create your own web APIs and craft them exactly the way you need them. It's just going to be a much better developer experience and probably a much better end result with your APIs. So if you're building APIs and listening, take that pro tip from both of us. I think you would agree.
Yeah, that worked really well. And it's very similar to, Kentico Xperience is designed to be used in MVC sites, so it works very well being used in a web API project. All the same, we made all the same API calls as we would an MVC site to get the content, and then we serialized it as JSON and delivered it to the e-commerce site.
So say enterprises do this and they bring in Xperience, they add that as one of their tools in their microservice architecture. Are there some long-term benefits that you think that they would see, or some fun just like a side benefits of using this that people listening can maybe take and use as like argument points for why they should do this in their organization?
Yeah, so especially when we look at online marketing features being involved, one thing they get from using a all-in-one solution like Xperience, even if they do it headless, is everything is connected together. So whatever the user's doing in the website is informing the marketing team about that user. So, if it's someone searching for large equipment, you might go, or any parts for large equipment, you might put them in the profile of diesel mechanic, right? You know that on the web, but if you're using a separate email solution, you might still be sending that same person generic newsletters and generic emails that fail to actually build a relationship with that user. But if, because you have it all tied together, as soon as you know something about that user on the website, you can use that same information to personalize emails. And at that point, you're able to build a relationship with your users, your customers, because they'll think, hey, this organization is just for me. It's the perfect fit for me. They know me because, oh, we know this person's, or we believe this person's a decent mechanic, and we're like, the headers and emails, the ads on the website, all that stuff is tailored to them. We're not, sending them deals on motorcycle parts.
Nice.
To use the analogy.
Nice. Yeah.
So that would be a benefit people would see.
I think it makes sense. I think that, if you're listening to this, someone might think like, well, wait a minute, I could have put in any other headless CMS tool that's already out there. There are plenty that I can download and use or just use as a SaaS offering. But I think there are very few things that could do what you've mentioned: the content management, the routing, the ability to be extensible with the API, and then that digital marketing component on top of all that, and be able to do the personalization and have the newsletters go. So, and not to mention, it's a not as I guess high of an ongoing cost that another complete other marketing platform you'd have to invest in over time. You really have just the one subscription price with the Xperience, and you get all that. So I think it's a great tool.
Right. In fact, that's a big reason why this customer chose to use Xperience. They were interested in Xperience even before they were committed to a headless architecture, because
I see. That's okay.
He was asleep when we started, but anyway, they were attracted to Xperience because of the value. You get so much in one package, and there's other products in the marketplace that are an order of magnitude more expensive.
Yep.
But with this, they not only got the content management, but they got the online marketing features all in one. So they're actually able to decommission subscriptions they have for other marketing services by using Xperience.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Okay. So we're getting close here. So I want to leave people with a few tips. If you're listening, you've heard us talk about leveraging Xperience in an enterprise that has a lot of microservices already. Mike, maybe what would you summarize for someone? What's the key message of how they could maybe take this back and possibly use this technique?
Yeah, to me, the big takeaway is to not be afraid to propose Xperience in a large enterprise, whether you're a decision maker in that enterprise or whether you're a partner in proposing solutions to customers. A platform like Xperience that's providing an all-in-one solution often meets resistance because it seems like it wouldn't fit into the existing ecosystem. It would require or force re-architecture. But the reality is if you recognize Xperience also has a robust API and is very extensible, you can fit it into the existing ecosystem and architecture and have it complement the existing architecture instead of being a competitive product or a competition or a disparate service. So don't be afraid to propose Xperience in an enterprise that has a robust, large, established ecosystem, but instead recognize, especially with a headless architecture, it can neatly fit in. And then you could get all the value of an all-in-one platform without disrupting the whole enterprise's architecture.
Fantastic. Well, you heard it right there from Mike Wills, Director of Development at BlueModus, Kentico Xperience MVP. Don't be afraid to leverage Xperience in a microservice architecture. So, Mike, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I think it's a great conversation. I know we could probably talk about this for like another 25 minutes. Chances are no one will be listening to us at that point anyway. But no, I seriously appreciate it. Let the listeners know if they have questions for you, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can contact me on Twitter, Hey Mike Wills, or email me at BlueModus, mwills@bluemodus.com.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate it. Some of the things we've talked about we'll put in the show notes on the page that we host about the podcast. So thank you all for listening, everyone. Thank you, Mike, for joining. Thank you to your dog as well for making a special cameo appearance. That's completely welcome in this day and age. And right. I will let you go enjoy the rest of your evening. And with that, this has been episode number 37 of the Kentico Rocks podcast. We'll talk to you all next time.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Take care, everybody.